Welcome to this webinar session on the Doctoral Network Understanding Latin American Challenges in the 21st Century, LAC-EU. My name is Andrea Bianculli, and I am the academic coordinator of this doctoral network. So thank you very much for joining us today for this informative session. Let me tell you first how we will organize the session. I will first tell you a bit about the program, the content, the thesis, and then we will have some time for Q&A. So I suggest you write your questions using the chat feature. The project managers will be answering these questions too. So this is a doctoral network funded under the Marie Curie Actions of the European Commission. We submitted this proposal in 2022, and it was finally accepted for funding a year ago. Under this call, there were 942 applications that were evaluated in total, and 149 applications were accepted for funding. LAC-EU is one of the 15 projects funded in Spain, and I would say it is one of the very few doctoral networks that includes a Latin American beneficiary. The title of our network is Understanding Latin American Challenges in the 21st Century, and the acronym LAC-EU. The project will be running for 48 months. So we launched the project on February the 1st of this year, and it will be running until the end of January of 2028. Within this time frame, PhD students will be part of the network for 36 months, starting in October 2024. This depicts the information of the project as it is published under Cordis, where you can access information, complete information about EU research and development projects. So I think it is important to know that LAC-EU is not a research project. It is a doctoral network, and as such, it is a research training program. LAC-EU will provide a 3-year PhD training program for 12 students, 12 doctoral students who will also be doing internships and secondments in different institutions. The main research objective of the network is to deepen our understanding of Latin America and the challenges that the region faces, and some of which are also shared by the European Union, if we think of issues like the rise of populism, migration, gender equality, and climate change, among others. To that end, LAC-EU will develop an interdisciplinary framework based on social and political sciences, law, and humanities to assess Latin American multi-level governance and its relationship with the European Union. In practical and policy terms, the doctoral network is intended to provide a revised and updated strategy for EU-Latin American relations. To our knowledge, these relations are still very much guided by the norms and frameworks that were launched in the 1990s, which were based on a North-South logic as framed under the interregionalism strategy. Since then, Latin America has changed dramatically, but also the European Union has been transformed, and both these two actors are currently immersed in an international context, very much marked by relevant transformations, right? A complex transition with a crisis of globalization, recurrent crises and challenges to the liberal rules and norms underpinning global governance. Conceptually, LAC-EU concentrates on different governance levels under this overarching analytical framework I have mentioned before. From a domestic governance perspective, the network will identify social and political issues within countries. This means at the national level, as for example, analyzing democratic resistance in specific countries in the region. From a regional governance perspective, we intend to identify issues with a new significance for the region as a whole. In this respect, we can think of topics and agendas like migration governance, which is a challenge the region faces in South America, but also in Central America. When it comes to global reach, we intend to assess the impact of the region, of Latin America, beyond the region itself. And in so doing, we will assess soft power resources and instruments. To our understanding, this notion of global reach has been used to analyze and to study the European Union, but has remained quite neglected when it comes to studying Latin America. The fourth level of governance refers to interregional relations, with the idea of examining the dynamics of bi-regional interactions in both formal and informal settings. And finally, global governance intends to capture the role of the region in world politics, as in the case of Latin American cities and their involvement in global cities networks, for example. So this means that the 12 PhD projects that will be carried out within our doctoral network will sit at the intersection of these different levels of governance I have just identified and described, and the two research work packages of the network. The first work package on research focuses on democracy, politics, and human rights. And the second one looks into trade, climate change, and market risks. So in the case of domestic governance and under work package 1, we find theses like democratic resistance and mobilizing civil society, also data and technology in cities governance. And in the case of trade, the thesis will focus on governing the gender health nexus. If we move to the regional governance level, here thesis will focus on the governance of migration flows in Latin America and on gender, social policy, and trade in Latin American regional governance. From a global reach perspective, thesis will focus on translating Latin America, and this means fighting political stereotypes in European publishing houses. And a second thesis will look into trade, identities, and market access. From a EU-LAC international perspective, thesis will look into EU-LAC relations in the context of the United Nations Human Rights Council, and also on EU-LAC investment relations and green finance. And this includes another thesis that looks into EU soft power and a democratic green transformation in Latin America. Finally, from a global governance perspective, thesis will focus first on the involvement of Latin America in transnational and global cities networks, and on the engagement of Latin American countries in multilateral trade governance. So this map clearly illustrates the LAC-EU network. So this is a network that brings together outstanding research expertise in diverse fields, which includes democracy, human rights, trade, environment, governance, and other topics, and also relevant expertise in terms of the EU, Latin America, and on the interregional partnership dynamic between these two regions. More importantly, to our understanding, this map illustrates that the network connects geographically diverse institutions, as we have partners in the European Union and Latin America, also spanning different sub-regions as well. So this is a list of all the institutions that are part of our doctoral network. The first list presents the names of those institutions that are beneficiaries of the doctoral network. This means that these are the institutions that will be providing PhD training and also secondments. On the other hand, we have the list of associated partners who will provide secondments and training in transferable skills and career development. So in all, there are 16 institutions, as you can see, distributed in the European Union, but also in different countries in Latin America. So this table presents a list where you can find the 12 researchers, right? You can also see the information in terms of where they will be doing their PhD, right? The institution that will be awarding the PhD degree, and also the specific projects and titles that they will be doing during their 36 program, PhD program, 36-month PhD program. So it's important to note that these topics cannot be changed because they were part of the proposal and have been already approved by the European Commission, but also because these different projects are already set up as individual projects, but in relation to the other theses. This means that changing your topic could affect the relationships between the individual projects and the whole logic of the doctoral network at large. Each PhD student will have a PhD supervisor at the institution where it is based, and 2 other people will be part of what we call the PhD accompanying committee. This table introduces the secondments. So, as I said, doctoral networks are intended to provide PhD training, but they are also intended to expose doctoral researchers to non-academic sectors. Thus, the idea is to provide research-related training as well as to promote competencies that are relevant to innovation and long-term employability. The focus is very much both on research and transferable skills. In this sense, secondments are a crucial element component of the PhD training program. In the case of LAC-EU, LAC-EU comprises 2 secondments for each doctoral researcher in 2 different institutions with a duration of 3 months each. This means that within the doctoral network, training is delivered through 3 main activities. Local training, as offered at the host institution where the doctoral candidate will be working. The secondment program, which includes visits by each doctoral candidate to other beneficiaries or associated partners, and the network-wide training events that will be held every 6 months approximately. All these activities, of course, will be explained and detailed in a personal career development plan that each doctoral candidate will elaborate with his or her supervisor and also the accompanying committee. And this career plan will be reviewed every 6 months. So regarding the call for applications and the selection process, we would like to underscore that LAC-EU will closely follow the OTMR. This is the open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment of researchers, and it will also be based on the European Charter for Researchers and Code of Conduct for the recruitment of researchers. The general call, this is the call for the 12 different PhD positions, is already available on Euraccess and also on the LAC-EU website. On the LAC-EU website, you will also find the call by each beneficiary. And this is important because if you're interested in applying for a position, you should do the application process through each university. Please check the dates and specific requirements under each university to apply for the scholarship, because there may be variation in terms of requirements and more specifically about dates. So through this application, you will be applying for the scholarship. And later on, if admitted, you will have to apply for the university PhD program. In terms of requirements, so in order to apply for a doctoral fellowship under the LAC-EU program, it is important to note that candidates must not hold a doctoral degree at the date of their recruitment. They can be of any nationality and they should be enrolled in a doctoral program during the project. The candidate should also comply with the mobility rule. This means that in general, they must not have resided or carried out their main activity, either work, studies, or other activities in the country of the institution that will be recruiting this PhD candidate for more than 12 months in the 36 months immediately before the recruitment date. And a very relevant requirement too for this LAC-EU doctoral network is that candidates should be fluent both in English and in Spanish. So this is the webpage of LAC-EU, where under call for PhD fellowships, you will find the general call explaining what the doctoral network is about and the specific general requirements, and then you will find the links to the different positions that are open and for which you can apply. In terms of benefits, doctoral candidates are entitled to a living allowance according to the Marie Curie call and, of course, national regulations of the country where the student will be based. They will also be entitled to a mobility allowance, and where appropriate, family, long-term leave and special needs allowances will also be provided. Doctoral students will be employed on full-time labor contracts. This means that they are entitled to pensions, social security contributions, unemployment benefits, and paid holidays. Working conditions also allow for flexible working hours to facilitate childcare arrangements, gender equality, and work-life balance. So let me just conclude by providing you with some sources where you can obtain more information on the doctoral network, on the projects. And this is our webpage, LAC-EU Network. You also have there the email where you can also require more details and information on the network, the application process and selection process. And finally, we have recently created an account on X where you can also follow our news and new developments. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Now we can have some time for questions and answers. As I said, please use the chat feature. Thank you.